All right, so this is kind of where we are, and we have this very classical, we call it three-tier web application. Okay, we got a front-end page, we have this backend server, and then we have a database. And then both server and database, sometimes people call it backend, and then that interacts with the front end. Okay, so going back to our code, just to recap, we have our Python Flask program, which is our backend server. We connect to the MongoDB last time, and then we have different URLs. The most important one is the one we're returning the HTML pages, and we wrote that page last time as well with a little bit CSS and also the JavaScript. Okay. So in order to run this application, once again, I'm going to run that in PyCharm in IDE, and I go to the URL, and then you can see the homepage, and you can type any kind of budget you want. And now you, as you may know, this data come from the MongoDB database. Okay, so if I give a higher budget, and then you're going to see more items. And if we go to lower 5, and yeah, it has less items. Okay, that's where we are. But everything here so far runs locally. Okay, so if you look at the URL here, the IP address called 127.0.0.1, that means localhost. Sometimes you can also do something like localhost called and then a port number, and that goes to the same place. Okay, so this is all good, very good starting point. But you guys cannot visit it because it's only sit on my machine. Now, theoretically, you could actually find out the IP of my machine and then visit it. But most of the time, okay, whether it's in school, at home, your IP is not a real IP. It's also there are a lot of security rules being set up. You just can't let people to visit your IP easily. So we need to run this one in a more professional, more public server so that really everyone in the internet can visit your application. Okay, that's what we're trying to do today. Okay, along with that, there are a lot of other small details you have to configure. Okay, so I'm going to go through that very quickly. I want to just focus on the most important part. Okay, so the goal today is to deploy this on the server and have a public URL that people can visit. Once you have that, you can then also start to update and make more changes on the site. So you can see those changes will also be redeployed and reflected in the server. Okay. So before we do that, we want to make sure that all the code, everything has been saved. I think I already did this last time, and then just push everything to GitHub, and this is repository. This is very important. Every time you do something, make some changes. Once you test it locally, it's working, and that's great. We should actually save all the changes first. Okay, so just going back to my server here, I'm going to start my server. And now I want to double check from the terminal to look at the Git status. So everything looks like it's already checked in. And then there's one file which has not been tracked. To ignore this one, you could actually create some file called git ignore, right? So I'm going to go here. So go to a new file. I'll go dot git ignore because there's certain things that you don't want to track by the version control. Okay, so this is one of them. I can just copy this. Um, okay. And then if you add that file and then we do git status. So this is tracked and this is modified, but this old file is gone. Okay, so we're basically telling Git that anything started with .idea, which is related with the IDE configuration, we shouldn't actually push that to the GitHub. So if you do that, and I need to add this file here to do git commit, update the git ignore, and then we do push. All right, so now the new changes comes here. This repository has a new git ignore file, and now I go back to git status, and everything's clean, up to date. Okay, so now we're good for at least for the current version. In the future, anytime you make a new change, just put the change again. All right, so I'm not gonna dive into the Git here, but I will post a separate video if you haven't used too much about Git or GitHub. But that part should be something pretty straightforward. All right, so now let's actually try to deploy this. Okay, now think about this whole deployment process. When we talk about deployment, that means that right now this program is running locally, okay, in my machine, okay? And we want to run this code in a different machine. a different server. That server hopefully is a very good, computer with good internet connection, and more importantly, it's public. It's well connected to the internet. You don't need to have a lot of configuration, and then it has an IP address, has a domain name that people can easily visit. Okay, so we need that kind of a server. Okay, now in the past, we're looking at 20 years ago. Um, whenever you need a server, well, you actually have to buy and build a server. Well, the server is not quite different from a regular PC, but normally you see the box is a little bit bigger, has better fans because the server normally always runs, never stops. And then 20 years ago, whether it's companies or individuals, people actually buy machines, assembly servers, and then put it somewhere, whether it's in the server room or at home. And once you have a server machine, you actually connect to the internet. A lot of the time, you need some special internet connection, special configurations. And for computer, you also need to install different kind of operating systems. For example, instead of using a personal Windows, a lot of time people do Windows Server or sometimes people run Linux. Okay, so all those different kind of configurations. That's how people do in the past. Now, these days, we still need the same in the server, but you never need to run and buy that server because it's just a lot of work, a lot of time. And right now, you order a server, you wait to come, and you assemble them, you get internet connection, you install the software. It's gonna take you at least a couple weeks, at least. In the past, it may take you, 1 or 2 months. Okay, think about you're trying to launch a project. You have this great idea, you want to get a market quickly, and that server process is going to block you a lot, right? So that's why these days, almost nobody actually build those servers, especially for startups. Okay, so we use cloud servers. Okay, cloud computing, you heard about this term all the time. All it's trying to say is that we gave you all the server resources, okay, in a virtual environment so that you can easily grab those, you can easily request and use. Obviously, you pay for those cloud servers, but then you don't pay that, like a monthly rental kind of thing. No, you actually only pay for the amount of time you're running. It could be like 1 hour, 2 hours, or you can start with 5 hours a day and then you close this, and then you can restart it. So it's really flexible. That's the big idea of cloud computing. Okay, so once again, today when I talk about cloud computing, I don't think it's anything too much new. There are so many different cloud providers. So what I'm trying to demo is basically the most famous one, which is the AWS from Amazon. Okay, so for this part of the course, okay, I want everyone to sign up just AWS, okay, to run this first application in the AWS in EC2. I know some of you have been using Google Cloud, maybe some of you use Microsoft Azure, some of you knows Vercel, knows a lot of other cloud providers, Render, there are a lot of options. Okay, so we'll talk about those in the near future, but at this stage, I want you to use AWS, create a server in your own account in AWS, and deploy this little application there. Okay, because I want you to make sure you understand all the cloud computing, the server. AWS is still the most popular choice, and a lot of companies are still using that. Big companies, small companies, especially startups. And then AWS is something called infrastructure as a service. So they gave you all the servers you can control, you can manage. I don't want you to jump into Vercel right away because uh, this type of thing is it's like too easy to use. Okay, we'll let you to use this one for the course project. But at this point, before we do that, I want you to go back to the fundamental way of creating server, configuring the server, moving your code over there, do all this continuous integration, which I will show you later today. I want you to know that fundamental process. And you don't have to do this one again in the future, but at least you go through this whole process, you know exactly what's going on with all the server environments. Okay. So I will just dive into the demo. Okay, so everyone need to have AWS account. Okay, so it's basically provided by Amazon. It's basically the most popular cloud computing provider. And then just sign into the console. If you don't have an account, you have to just sign up, and then you will need a credit card for that. Okay, but if this is the first time you're using it, there are free tiers you can try to get you some server to use for free for 1 year. Okay, so that shouldn't be a problem. Okay, if you already use that free tier, I would suggest that you just use a different email. That should give you another kind of chance. All right. So having a credit card, but you don't have to pay too much. Okay, so this is kind of what you see once you log in to AWS. Okay. So they have a lot of different services. Over the years, they have built tons of services. In the very beginning, I would say back in 2009, that was when I first time using AWS. That they only have like 6 or 7 different services, including EC2, S3, and then some of the networking services. But now they have a lot of those. Pretty much anything you want to build, they gave you some kind of options. Okay, so very powerful. But we're only going to use this one service, which is the server. Okay, so if you go to something called a compute, and there's something called EC2, stands for Elastic Computing, Cloud Computing. Okay, and basically it's a service. They're giving the server to use. Okay, so we only need this one service. Okay, so go to EC2. All right, you're gonna see some kind of dashboard here, and then you want to go to somewhere called instances. Okay, and instances in EC2 or in AWS means servers. Okay, they don't call it server because you're not using a real physical server. They use virtualization. So they have a lot of machines. They divide those machines into smaller, machines, um, and everyone run your things totally independently. So they give a different name called instance, but basic idea is same as a server. Before I show you here, some of the important facts to know is that on the top right, you have this little drop-down menu. So if you click on that, you can see there are different kind of locations, and these are called different regions. In AWS, they call it region. All it means that they have different kind of physical data centers in these regions that where they run the service. So for example, we are at the West One, the Northern California region. So which means near Northern California somewhere, they have their big warehouse. They host all the machines, the data center there. They have one in Oregon. They have one in Virginia. That's the probably largest one. And then they also add one in the Ohio. And you can also choose the servers in all the other regions in other countries. Okay. Now this is a very big benefit because number one, you could have some kind of a redundancy for reliability. Okay. For example, instead of just running your server in one place only, what if the power is off? That actually happens. Sometime in the summer when there's a storm, the whole data center might be off temporarily. Okay. So at least you have some other regions to support it. And then the second benefit is that sometimes if you want to launch your application just for a different region, especially internationally, this one give you a huge benefit because if you want to target, for example, Europe, okay, if you want to provide a really good performance, you better put your server in that region so that people there can connect to your applications faster, right? But without cloud computing, if I ask you to put a server there, that's actually a lot of work, okay? Physically moving there to set up things, not to mention all the regulation stuff. Okay, so that's a lot of work. So, but with AWS or other cloud services, you can easily click, change the region, and create a server. Again, within 5 minutes, you have a server ready to use. Okay, so that's the region. I want you to show this one because sometimes if the first time you log in, maybe default is Virginia. It's not California. So you gotta make sure you choose the right one because they only show you the servers under that region. Okay, so if you create something here, but you switched region, then you won't be able to see it. Sometimes you saw you don't have a server, but in fact you have a server running in other places. And if you create a second one, the third one, they're gonna charge you more. It's going to go over the free tier. Okay, so something to be careful. Okay, so I will stay with the Northern California. And from here, and you can start to launch your instance, which means you're going to launch a server. Okay, so this one isn't that difficult. So you should provide a name. I'm going to give a name for the $5 lunch project app. And then here you choose which like operating system to use. Most of the time, the server uses Linux because it's lightweight, it's safer, and you don't need a heavy like a Windows UI to support it. That's just going to take more resources. So most of the servers runs in Linux, and then they have the Amazon Linux version. They have other ones that you're more familiar with, like Ubuntu. You have Red Hat, which is a commercial, and some other versions. And of course, you can always use Windows Server, which I don't think is needed for this application. So I'm going to go with the default Amazon server. And after that, this selection is very important. As you can see, they ask you to choose the type of server. The type of server means that the oh, sorry, not yet. This is actually the image. So the version, like which specific operating system you're using. Because for example, you can see they have some other Linux version that has some of the AI deep learning stuff. Okay, and then this one I would just go with the free tier one, the default one. They're not a big difference. For our application, this should be more than enough. And these ones just leave it as a default. And this is the part that's more important. This one choose the instance type, which is the server type. The server type means the configurations, specs. Okay, how much CPU, how much memory you want to have, and all of those configurations. Okay, so you want to know which one has the free tier eligible. So when you sign up for the account for the first time, for 1 year, you could have this free tier. So that's the one you can use. Okay, so there's something called a T3 Micro. It has two virtual CPU, 1 GB memory, and also some other things. But this should be enough. Okay. Sometime you might need more powerful server. You can scroll down. They have so many choices for you. Some of the servers are really, really powerful. You can see like this one, they call it a C7i and 48X large. So they have 192 CPUs. And they have 384 gigabytes of memory. You're not gonna have this kind of a spec for your personal computer, okay? But they have that in the data center. Or if you want to use the GPU, I'm pretty sure they also have this kind of option. So let's see what kind of a GPU option they have. Um, they have so many. 10 years ago when we were doing the course, they only have maybe 20 or so. But I remember they also have some GPUs. See. Hmm. Or maybe that's a different category. Okay, so but the more spec you have, the more expensive because if you look at the pricing here, so see this one. This one also is even bigger. Okay, 384 CPUs and then almost 800 gigabytes of RAM. But this machine, if you run it, that's going to cost you like $20+ per hour. Every hour is $20. Okay, that's super expensive. So all the pricing are based on hours. Okay, you can choose to run, for the whole day or a certain amount of hours. But for the free tier, don't worry about it. It's just for free for whole 1 year, 24/7. That should be enough. Okay, but anyway, here just be careful. Sometimes if you accidentally choose a bigger one, that's gonna trigger a lot of cost for you. Okay, so I'll stay with the free tier. The key pair very important. That's basically the password to the machine. Okay, like private public key. So I'm gonna create one here. Just give a name. I'll call it Spring 2026. Okay, I'll create that and then download it. Make sure you know where that is. And network settings, just leave it at default. And yeah, that's it. And then I'm not gonna change anything else. I'll go to launch this instance. Okay, now they're gonna start a server. Okay, so they're gonna create it. They probably can create this really quickly. It looks like it's all already running it's really fast, and they're gonna do some other checking, and then you're almost ready to use. Once you have a server up and running, some of the important information you can find here is the address. So see, they have a public IP address. So that IP address is real. Okay, you can really find your machine using this one, or you can also use the public domain name. That's a domain name they provided from Amazon that you can visit this machine. Okay, so that's a step one. Okay, getting your server ready. All right. So everyone need to do the same thing. Okay, so go sign up your AWS account and choose the server and then run it. All right. There will be a lot of tutorials available for you to check, okay, on how to use AWS. All right. So once we have it, so what are we going to do with it? How are we going to operate the server? Well, you have to first connect to the server and log into the server so that you can do the things on that machine. So they provide, normally we actually run this in terminal, but I want to simplify this one. Okay, let's just go to here, right click, and there's a connect. And then they do provide you a broader base kind of a connector that you can use. Just leave it as default here. Just click on connect. and then they just launch a terminal right here, which is pretty, easy to use. Okay, so it's a terminal, it's a Linux, everything is terminal command line based. You should get used to this type of environment. And it's most of the server, I would say 95% of server are on Linux. Okay, there's some kind of old server running in Windows Server, but not very common. And that's a different machine. Okay, different from my local machine. And they have files, okay, folders and everything. So that means it's ready to use. It is a physical, not a physical, but it's a real computer that you have the permission to use to save stuff to run different kind of applications. Okay, so this step here is good. Now, once we have a server, what's the next thing to do? Well, we're gonna run our code there, right? Because I already know how to run it here, and now you need to run the same thing on the real server. Okay, so if you want to run the code, well, first thing you need to do is to get all of the code into this server. Otherwise, there's nothing you can run. Okay, so there are different ways you can do it. You can try to copy all the files over. In other words, you can download all the files in this machine. There are ways we can do this one. We can do something called like a SCP, called a secure copy, which allows you to remotely copy the files. But as you can imagine, there's an easier way to do is, since we have everything in the Git, right? So why don't we just get all the code from GitHub? And GitHub will be served as kind of a code server, which is essentially the purpose of GitHub. So we're gonna get all the repository from here to the server machine. So in order to do that, you gotta make sure your server has a Git installed. Right now, when I run Git, it doesn't work. So we have to install Git in AWS. Okay. So how do we do that? Well, in this case, just either Google that, okay, install Git in AWS EC2, and you normally can find a lot of this kind of oh, now they pop up the AI stuff, but you should be able to find something too much ads here. All right, something like the yum install or those. This part you just need to Google a little bit, and let me try to find some better. They use the yum install. Let's just try this one. Okay. So it's right here. Going back to the terminal, yum install, and they need to have a permission. So we'll do sudo. All right, so they're fetching the latest version of Git, and you get the command ready. So if I run Git right now, yeah, it works now. Okay, so pretty simple. Just Google it, and obviously if you use ChatGPT, they will tell you probably something even better and more faster, right? So same idea. Okay, so make sure Git all everything's ready. All right, so if you have that, that's great. So let's get our repository. I think I put this one as a public repository, so it should be allowing us to directly use. If not, then you have to configure your authentication here, have the password ready. So I do git clone, okay, and then I get the repository. Yep, everything is getting over here, right? So if I look at the folder here, it's right here. I go to $5 lunch, and that's all the files, exactly the same as my local version. Okay, so that's one more step here. All right, so now let's actually try to run this. Okay, to run this one, I was trying to run this one here locally with Python, right? But with IDE, but you need to run this with a command line. Okay, so as a lot of you already know, if you want to run this in the command line, well, you do Python, all right, and then you run that file, which is a $5. Okay, if you do this one, and that gives you the same thing, and then you can go here to visit it, right? So now we need to do the same thing in our server. Okay, so let's actually go ahead, go back to our terminal. Okay, I'm gonna do Python and $5 app.py. All right, when I run this, well, you got an error. Python is not found. Okay, so you have to install even Python. Okay, this is not by default there. But sometimes they have a other thing like here, they have a Python 3 install. That's pretty good to use. I think I'm gonna stay with Python 3. Just double check because sometimes most machine today probably already have some kind of Python installed, but if not, you can still install it. Okay. So once you have Python, in this case, Python 3, I can run Python 3, and then I do that $5 um app.py. Okay. Now when I run this, well, I got another error. And if you read it, it's saying that no module found called Flask. Okay. So if you're familiar with Python, what happened is that we have some of the dependencies we use. We import Flask, we import a PyMongo, but we don't have those in the server machine. Okay. If you remember, as I was doing this one in IDE, what I did was I was using the PyCharm to configure all of those. I was here trying to install the Python Flask. So I was doing this one in the GUI, so it's a lot easier. But what you need to do now is to do pip install. Okay, if you know, that's how Python manages all the dependencies. All right. So now we're gonna make sure the pip command is ready. So I do pip3, and that's also not there. So it looks like we just got to install pip first. Okay, so this time I'm just gonna go through the ChatGPT because I think that's a lot more efficient. Okay, so how to install in AWS EC2 uh, Linux with the Amazon uh, image. All right, so they are searching pretty seriously. All right, so they want you to do a lot of updates and get a Python 3. Let's just follow this. Okay, so I'm gonna run this one by one. So I'm gonna update this yum update is just trying to update the whole version of all the software repository, and they are trying to reinstall the Python 3. Let's just do that. Okay, this one is good. All right, and then they do this. I don't know what this one is trying to do, but I'm just gonna follow that. It looks like some kind of update. And this is where you're going to install all the tools, including pip stuff. All right. And then after that, we do pip3 version, and that actually good to go. Okay, so now you run pip3, and this works. Okay, so obviously the ChatGPT works more efficiently than the other. Okay, so anyway, going back to the code. Okay, I was trying to run Python 3 $5 app, and it's asking for the Flask dependency. So what I do is pip3 install, and then I do Flask. Let's just try that. Okay, so that's gonna install all the things you need. So I'm gonna go back, run this command again, and now they're asking for PyMongo. Okay, you have to install all of this. All right, so if you know Python well enough, okay, so there are better ways to manage this. Now, what you could do is that you can generate all the list of dependencies for the project and then create a file there, right? So let me show you. So what's the best practice here is that since you have all the dependencies ready, so what you can do is do pip called freeze. And then you can say that I'm gonna generate all the things and then put them into requirement dot txt. Let me just be safe, okay? How to generate all the Python dependencies for existing project. All right, so they want you to use the virtual environment. I'm gonna skip right now because I just want you to focus on the most important part. They have a pip freeze and then I'll put that to the requirements, okay, with S. Okay, so let me try to do this one first. If I run this locally, this is local, okay? As you can see, they create a file called requirement.txt, and then where they automatically generate all the dependency we've been using from this project. We just deal with Flask, and then they also need a Mongo PyMongo, and then there's something else which is dependent by maybe this or the other dependencies. That's why this tool is very helpful because they just get everything summarized for you. So once I have this one, I want to first of all I need to push this. Okay, git at requirements, git commit, and git push. All right. So once you have this, now going back to the server, oh, not here, the server terminal. Okay, so what I need now is I need to get the latest changes. Okay, so I do git pull dash dash rebase. All right, so now they actually bring me this new file called requirement.txt. Now, what you can do with this file right now is do pip3 install, and you can do -r, and you can say, please install everything from this file. And then if I run this, all right, so this is something you often will see in the when you deal with Python. But generally, if you run this one, you saw a lot of version. It's just not right. And if you look at this one, okay, first of all, if you throw this whole thing into ChatGPT, they can probably tell you something. But right here, they require some kind of Python version. Maybe it's greater than 3.10. Because my machine, I think I was using a Python 3.12. So a lot of dependencies are based on that version. And now this machine actually has only like a 3.9. Okay, so let me just be safe. Okay, so I'll also update my Python here into 3.12. Okay, so let me ask how to install Python 3.12 in EC2 Amazon Linux. All right, so it looks like there's a specific version. Okay, so I'm trying to use this one. Um, okay, let's see if we have any luck. All right, update, and then we install specifically Python 3.12. All right, verify that. Okay, that looks good. And also same thing for the pip. Okay, so now when you run the command, you actually have to run specifically Python 3.12. Okay, so that give you that version. And then if you only do Python 3, that's still the old version. So sometimes to make it easier, I want to say, okay, to turn, so I'll ask how to make the default Python 3 command to be using 3.12. And then they are going to basically redirect all the commands. Um, all right, let's try this one to set the command. Oh, not here. In here. Okay, so they don't have this. Because we don't have that Python. Um, let's do this, but we do have Python 3. Okay, so now if I do Python 3, no, that's not right. Let me make sure this one still works. Or let me try this one. Okay, so anyway, that's a better solution. Okay, we created like an alias, just to kind of like a name a variable for the command. Okay, anyway, so we got everything ready. So let's actually try to run this again. So I'm gonna do pip 3. Let me first make sure the version is right. Okay. Um, wait. All right, so somehow the command was messed up. But anyway, I'm not gonna debug too much on that one since I have one version here, 3.12 working. I'm gonna try this pip install -r requirements .txt. This time, it does work because that version is the same thing as we run locally. Okay, let's not worry too much about the version conflicts. The better practice is to create a virtual environment, things like that. But I want to just simplify things. Okay, just so you can see the core steps. Okay, now let's try to run this thing. I'm also going to use Python 3.12 just to be safe. I will run this thing called a $5 app. Perfect. Now you can see this is the same kind of output compared with our local, but the difference is that this time the program is running on the AWS server. Okay. So now how do we visit this one? Okay. Previously we were using here locally, um, the this one here, local host, but now we don't have it. So we are going to find out our server. So this is where you need. Okay, so you can either use this IP address or better ways to use the DNS name here. So I'm going to copy this. That actually is going to point out the actual server address. And also don't forget, we have a port number, which is 5050. All right, so if you do colon 5050, all right, and hit enter, that's supposed to go to your server. But then if you run this one, okay, first time, very likely going to see something similar. So right now, this thing is now responding, it's still loading. So which means something is wrong. Okay, if you see this one, first thing to check is that go to the server. As you can see, this is spinning. Okay, this is running, but it's just not giving the result, which is not right. So the first thing you should check is something called security. Okay, so what happened here is that by default, all the AWS servers, they only gave you the limited access in terms of the ports. So if you go here in the security, there's something called inbound rules. Okay, there is one specific rule called port 22 and allows you to visit that port from anywhere. Okay, if you remember, I told you the port, the concept of port that exists in every computer. So every computer has the same IP address, but on the computer, you can have multiple applications running. You can have browser running, email running, different applications all connected to the internet. So when the traffic is coming, how do I know which program is going to take that traffic? Well, we use the port number. That's why when we're specifying the program here, we specifically told the program to run the port on 5050. Okay, but the security here is not opening the 5050, so it's only opening the 22. Okay, so what you need to do right now is that I go to the security group. Okay, I find out this specific rule here. Okay, and I can just add another rule. I can edit it. I can just add a rule. Okay, just to make it simple, I'm just going to open all the traffic. I'll just say all traffic and from anywhere. Okay, just to turn it on. Okay, so that you don't need to worry too much about the configuration here. Okay, now everything is open. Any kind of port, any traffic can go. And now I go back here. Let me refresh. It already does refresh. And now you can see this app is up and running. All right. So I can try to type in here to search, and that works. Do a more budget, that also works. Do $5, that also works. All right. So this is a very good starting point. Okay. So this whole process is called a deployment. Okay. You have something running locally. Now you're running that in a server. In order to do that, you need to know how do you run the server, create a server, how do you get your code there, and how do you run your code. As you run your code, normally you have to deal with a lot of dependencies. Okay, so definitely try this whole process. You will see a lot of different issues, but as you can tell, the ChatGPT is going to be a very good assistant to help you. All right. Once you understand this one, I want to move on to say that, well, this is a very good start. Okay, so once we have it, this is not the finish of the project. Okay, so normally you have one version, you launch it, very good, but you will need to constantly adding more features, making more changes. Okay, so now let's take a look at how we're going to do a change from scratch again. So anytime you want to make a change, okay, so you need to run that locally, okay, from local, because you can't really change the code on the server first. So I still need to go back here, okay. I'll make sure that I can run everything locally. This is the local version, okay. So let's say that I want to maybe change the font type size a little bit bigger, okay. So very simple change. What I do is I go to here, all right, and then I go to uh, the size. Okay, maybe I think I was using a H1. Yes, right here. And there should be something called font size. Let me try that, okay. If I do that. Yep. So just to make it a little bit bigger, I'll just reduce that to maybe 70. All right. Okay. So now since I assume I'm done with the change, what I do now is I go back to terminal. Look at the change. That's the change we made. Add, commit, change the title font size, and then push. All right, so this will go to the repository. All right, so make sure everything is updated here. Now we got a new commit here. All right, now, but then the server here is still having the old version. Okay, because you're not picking up the new code yet. So I go back here. What I do is I stop the server. Okay, and then I will need to do git pull that dash rebase, get the latest change. And I just need to rerun this one. All right, when this one is rerun, and I'm gonna refresh, and that actually got updated. Okay, so that's how you do this one um, with more changes. Uh, change locally, test locally, push the code, go to the server, reapply the same changes. Okay, that's really the essential part. But in practice, people ask you to do testing, which I will talk in the near future. There's some best practice you have to follow, but essentially, okay, these are the main thing you have to finish. No matter how big the application is. Think about Amazon.com. It's a very complicated homepage web application, but every single change the same thing. There may be hundreds of different teams that working on different part of the site, but they do the same thing. They write a code locally, test it, and then they push the code, and they use some kind of mechanism to make sure the code change is going to be applied to the in the server side, and then they rerun the server. That's it. Okay. So, but there are some small things I want to point out first. Okay. So number one, right now, the way we are running the server, as you can see, I trigger the command here. I run the command, and that's how you can see this application here is up and running. But if I actually stop the server, okay, I go back to the terminal, and this one is gone. Okay. So this is not good because the terminal, normally you use this one for different kind of a control of the machine. You don't want to have a terminal open all the time to let the terminal stay there. Okay, that's not very convenient. So the best way is that since this is a server, it's supposed to running all the time unless you're making changes. So what we do is that we try to run this whole thing from the backend, from background. So you don't have to let the terminal stay here. Uh, Although you could open a new terminal, but still that's not convenient. What you should do is run this whole thing in the background and let it just be there all the time. So what do you do with that is that instead of running the command like this, okay, so there are different ways. Okay, so you're gonna do something like, first of all, you want to find a way to record all the logs. So I'll put this one as a file. So just in case something like this shows up, you can see what's going on. And then you actually put this sign here to indicate that this thing will be, running in the background. Okay. There is one more thing. I do want to make sure that that command does exist. It's something called a no hop. Okay. So this command is a kind of a safer that if you run everything behind this command, it's just going to make sure that this process is being running like very reliably. It's not going to be interrupted by a lot of other things. For example, you open the terminal, you close the terminal, that's not going to affect it. So it's just a safer way to control and run some kind of command. Let me try this one to see if that works. Okay. All right. So it looks like this one is working. As you can see now, when I run this command, I go back to my terminal. I can still do other things I want, but at the same time, that server is up and running already. So even I close the terminal, this thing is still gonna work. Okay, so that is how this command is gonna work. Okay, so I'll put more details here, and then the similar command you can actually find that in the uh, like Google or ChatGPT, they will give you something similar. Okay, so that you know how do you trigger this whole thing from the backend. All right. And now if you are making another change, there are some extra things you need to do because let me show you this one more time. Okay, let's say I go here, I want to make another change. Okay, and I just feel that maybe let me try to see what other changes we can do. All right, maybe somehow make the button also bigger. Okay, something similar. Simple. And I need to go back to the HTML page. Where do we do button? Yeah, we'll just increase that a little bit. All right. It's not very good. A lot of spaces here. Anyway, so I'll keep that simple change. Okay, not messing about around too much about the code. Okay, so once I'm done with the change, I go to terminal. I'm gonna repeat that whole process again. So add, commit, and then push. All right. So once you're making sure that all the code are coming to the repository, now you go to the server. Okay. And then we have to get pull. All right, we got a new code, and then we have to run that again. So we're gonna do this again. All right. But this time, if you do this, it's not gonna work. And then first of all, if you I'll just tell you the answer here. Okay, first of all, you don't see anything because everything going to this log file because that's what we want the server to do. So if you look at the file content, you can see everything going on. They tell you actually the address already in use. Don't forget this server here is already running. It's still running. So you're trying to run this program again, and that's gonna give you the error. So for example, I go here, I do Python 3.12, I do a $5 lunch. If I run this one, they said that this port is already in use, so you have to start a new one or replace the old one, right? So that's what's the error here about. What we should do is that we need to terminate the old one so that you can rerun this again to update it. And then the question is how do we terminate the old process? There are different commands you can ask. Okay, how to stop the running Python process in Linux. Okay, so they should give you the command to do that. All right, so that's the one. So I'm gonna use this command. I will go to my terminal here. All right, so that's going to filter your Python process. As you can see, this one is the program that you're running. And then along with that program, you have something called process ID, indicate the ID of that running process. Okay, and then you're gonna run the command called a Q. Okay, Q-9. That's the command we normally use. So I will do sudo Q-9, and then you're gonna copy this ID over, and that's gonna terminate the process. So now you go back here. It's not running anymore. And all you need to do is to rerun this. Don't forget to use this better command with the background, and then run this one. And going here, that's up and running, and this button got updated. Okay. So this time the changes, we add one more step. Okay, because once you get the code, you also need to stop the process and then restart it. Okay, that's the actual step. All right. But if you can do that one, you can basically keep pushing new changes and then let it go. Whether it's your individual project, you're the only one who pushes changes, or you have a team and then everyone will follow the same process and then pushing more changes. Okay. All right. So that if you can do the same thing, you can pretty much also deploy the server and then have something public. So what the assignment asks you to do, I posted earlier today, is to build something similar. Okay, you don't have to make it very complicated. And then at this point, you don't need to worry about this should be your final project. For your final project, I would let you to start with whole AI and again and use easier tools, universal, things like that. You don't have to worry about all this EC2 stuff. But it's so important you know how the whole server works, the deployment process was happening under the hood. Okay, so that's how you can differentiate yourself with other non-CS majors. Okay, I did put one more step for this assignment, which is called CI/CD. This is something called continuous integration. It's so important because I was trying to show you the whole flow of making a change. Okay, locally push and stop server, pull the code and rerun it, the whole thing. It's not difficult, but it's tedious. Every time you make a change, you have to repeat the whole process. The question is, can we automate this whole process? The answer is definitely yes. Okay, so but that actually requires some configuration. So what you could do now is that in GitHub, there's something called GitHub Actions. Okay, so they are going to allow you to do all the things you need and put together a script, and then they can actually run that script whenever you push a new change and do everything. So I'm just going to show you a very quick demo, and then you can see what that looks like. Okay, and then you can follow the same thing. But this one, I would need to use a lot of AI because there are a lot of configuration I can't even remember. Okay, so I'm going to type something very carefully here. So for my Python Flask project, okay, I can run it locally and also in AWS EC2. Now I need to configure a GitHub action to enable the continuous integration. That's what we're trying to do. All right. Here are the basic command I do. Run the app in the server I use. I'll just provide some of this as references. There are better way to do this. Okay, for now, I'm only trying to show you the very raw process. Okay. Okay, so the app is located in the user folder. In fact, this thing, if you use a cursor, it automatically created it. But I just want to give you the process we do. And then I use git to get the updated code. Okay. Now feel free to make changes and follow the best practice on configuring the GitHub actions. All right, let's see what they can provide. This is a pretty complicated process, but it's essentially they're going to give you this whole file that allows you to do the deployment. All right, so they ask you to do the virtual environment here, and they want you to create a service. That's not something we're looking for. Okay, so this is the one I'm looking for. All right, these are the settings we need to do. Okay, so I don't like that servicing because that's gonna make the whole thing more complicated. Okay, so please do not use this and just use my current approach. All right, so they do suggest putting together a kind of a running script. The script just automatically fetch everything and rerun everything here. All right, so that's something we can actually try. All right, and then they configure the GitHub actions. All right, so I'm trying to follow this one, okay, to see where we can get. So we need to create a run script. So I'm going to do it here. All right, and then we need to push it. Okay, so let's actually, oops. All right, so let me get the script first. Okay, we got the script, and let's actually see how they suggest to test it. All right, just to run it. All right, so they're trying to fetch from the Git and do all the pip install stuff. Yep, and then install, and also they have the log stuff. That looks like it's going all right. let me see if the script has anything to do with running the app. Yeah, they kill the old one, they're running the new one. Okay, looks like it's going. All right, so this one's still running. Okay. So for example, if I stop the server, okay, so let me actually stop the server on my own. Okay, I do sudo q here. All right, so now if I run this script, okay, one more time, this one is supposed to run the app again. All right, so that actually does trigger the app. So what we're trying to do right now is because there are a lot of process, you can see pull the code, stop the server, rerun the server. So what they suggested is to put together one single script. So you can just run this whole script and do everything. So which is better? Okay, that's what the script is trying to do. Script is not too difficult, but you see the major thing is the same thing that we've been doing. Okay, so that's step one. You got the script ready. Once you have this, then what you do is that in the GitHub Actions, you will need to configure something called .github and workflow and this whole thing, and then this one will know actually where to run. Wait, if this is the one and this is another one, so they need a different one. So this is a deploy, that's a CI. This is for testing, and this is for deployment. Okay, so it looks like we have two. So we need to create those. And to create the CI/CD, we will need to go to here and create a folder called .github. And yes. And from there, we're going to create another directory called workflows. All right, so we need two. One is called a CI. All right, so I'm going to just copy this. And then the other one is called deploy. All right. And then let me actually push everything. Okay, so in this case, once you put something here in this GitHub folder, okay, so the GitHub will recognize this as a GitHub Actions. So they will be able to execute this one. As you can see, every time you put something, they're going to automatically, run this in that process. Okay, so you can actually find out their logs, what's being executed. So everything's been specified in this file, which is the most important one is the deploy. Okay, so but all it's trying to do here is to whenever you put something to main, and they are going to run this part and trying to log into your server and use the host name, username, everything, and then they essentially they're going to run that like a script we just put. So that's what they're trying to do. But right now it actually failed because I don't think we give the permission yet. So we need to know, they need to know what's your EC2 host, the user, and the key stuff. Okay, so let's actually configure those. I think they talk about how we configure that. So we go to repository setting and the secret variables settings and secret variables. And then we go to actions. All right, so you need to configure some of the secrets here. New repository secret. Okay, so we need to have an EC2 host. That one is easy, so we're gonna use this one. All right, And then the second one is the user. This is also the same, the EC2 user. Call it EC2 dash user. And then finally, the key, that's the private key. Okay, that's the one when you create a server, they ask you for that, which is right here, this one, the PEM file. Okay, so let me try to get it. This is the key. All right, so we're gonna copy this whole thing. Yeah, that should be it. All right, so let me try to run this again, see if any lucks. Okay. Is there any way we can rerun this? Oh, we don't have a test here. So yeah, that's why. Okay, anyway, let's not worry about this one, but it's mostly the deployment. Okay. Let me try to put something more and see if this time works. Okay, so I'll go here. I'll just make some very little dummy changes. All right, so maybe change the title, app. Okay, so I'll do add. All right, and I try push. From now on, every time you push something, immediately you see the automatic sort of run this workflow. Okay, because right now this part of the goal is that we're trying to automate the whole thing. I don't want to manually go there, log in, stop, rerun everything. I want to put everything together into a script. They can run this automatically. Okay. Okay, so this time it works. Okay, so this update is actually went through the whole deployment process. And I don't have to touch the server anymore. But now if you go here, I refresh, see that thing got updated. That's the ultimate goal you want to reach. Okay. Because you see this how simple it is. All you are focusing is making the local changes. The moment you push, and it automatically pick up all the changes. Okay. So if you familiar with Vercel, they do the same thing. But you don't have to worry about all this whole configuration, all the script. They just connect to the GitHub and everything done. So this is much simpler. But I don't want you to start from here because if you start from here, you don't know what's going on behind it. So I think it's still worth to take 1 or 2 weeks to figure this whole thing out and be able to configure this on your own. That way, at least you understand what happened with the server, how the server talked to the GitHub, everything. Okay, so that's what we're asking. So show you one more demo. Okay, so I go from here, make one more change. Okay, I'll add one more for CPP only. So always test that locally. All right, just adding a little subtitle here. And if you're feeling good, I go to terminal, make the change, and push the change. That's it. And then all you need to do is just wait. And you can always just go here to check the updates. The other script, we don't actually need it. I think I complicated. This one, they asked you to run the test, but we didn't run any tests, so we don't need that. But you can ignore this for now. Just using one script is fine. This is the most important, okay? So it looks like this one is just finished. I go back here and refresh, and that site goes live. Okay, so I know the past 20 minutes is a little bit confusing. Okay, a lot of script and everything. Honestly, if you use a cursor, it's probably a lot easier. You just do that one and that automatic configure everything. You don't need to worry about it. But I still show this one so that at least you know what we're looking for, the major steps. Try it, okay? You can also, if you've been using cursor, you can directly use the cursor that also works and try to make it work. Okay, so this is what I'm asking for this assignment. Okay, so build a very basic version, run server, deploy that, configure the configuration, and then you're good to go. By that, you kind of understand the really fundamentals about whole full stack development. Okay, remember how we define the full stack? All right, you need to know how to build front end. You need to know how to use the database. You also need to know how to write a server program, but also don't forget, you have to know how to deploy everything and manage everything. And we call it operations. Sometimes people call it DevOps. This is a part of the job. Okay. However, with cloud computing, with all the generative AI, this step getting easier and easier. Previously, it's time consuming. First time you do this one, there's too many errors. Now you just follow, it will get you there. Okay. So yeah, I'll give you 1 week, okay? Try to finish everything. Just submit a URL, something like this. Just submit this one, we can click and then we can check. All right. After that, I will show you more like Gen AI stuff. In that case, you don't have to worry about all the coding stuff. Just use terminal and then just keep building. All right, sounds good. Yes. I'm sorry. Oh, in Canvas, in Canva. I don't know if I posted it yet. I'll maybe yeah, Canva will be good. Yeah, let me specify that.